Initially there was an initiative in Los Angeles that wanted to look at exactly this problem. Who it is that attends arts and culture, what do they look like, how do they behave, what crossover exists in the community. And what it led to was something that was called the Big List. Essentially, it was a mailing list trade for large and mid-sized organizations. Those folks who had the budget to do direct mail, essentially. That program existed for about 8 years. We were always participant in it. Initially it was managed by the LA Philharmonic, and then it went to the Los Angeles Chamber Orchestra, and then came to LA Stage Alliance for a number of years. What we found in that project was, over the course of the 8 years that it was around, about 100 different organizations participated, which is a chunk of the LA market. It's not comprehensive by any stretch of the imagination, but what we discovered was that in any given year, only 25 to 30 organizations would participate. So what we did is we partnered with a new vendor. We said, what if we take this idea of sharing information, aggregating data of arts and culture participation, and recast it? In our first round, I think we had about 110 organizations participate. And we had, once they submitted their information, we had just shy of 3 million households. To put that in context, when it was the Big List program, the largest pool we had at any time was 350,000 names. And then those that are in the mix, those that are participating in what we're calling the LA Stage Arts Census, then they can pull really comprehensive reports. They can understand exactly who it is that's attending their work. Additionally, which was new in our reframing of this, they can understand the percentage of crossover of their patrons with every other participating organization. We know in a marketplace as vast as this, marketing collaborations and partnerships often happen because you happen to know the other marketing director, right? You run into a net conference, hey, let's do something, let's do a cross-promotion. What we're hoping the Arts Census can do is to let them use data to inform those decisions. Oh, by the way, for whatever reason, you happen to share 40% of your audience with some company across town. One of the other things that sort of speaks to that idea is we've also included for-profit partners in the mix. We know from a patron's point of view, they don't necessarily differentiate between attending a nonprofit event or a for-profit event. To them, it's arts, culture, entertainment. Certainly in LA, that definition is kind of broadly accepted. And so to that end, it's really helped us to enlarge the size of the database and to solicit new partners to the table who might not always be at a nonprofit arts and culture conversation. Databases like this, with our vendor, exist now in 20 markets around the country. So we're beginning to apply to funding and talk to our colleagues to see, might we be able to talk about arts and culture participation across the country? What might we know? Might we be able to create a snapshot of the typical arts and culture consumer, genre-based, and then drill down and go, what are the differences from market to market? Typically, this kind of work exists in the space of nonprofit arts and culture groups, right? Our take is slightly different, including the for-profit. I think a logical next step, as a lot of the focus and conversation and dialogue in the country shifts towards individual artists, how might we begin to include those folks in the mix? So for example, with an NEA grant and a partnership with the Department of Cultural Affairs, we have a program called Dance Advance, which is a capacity building program for local dance companies and individual choreographers. We take them through a workshop series to build their capacity to look at increasing their ability to tour. We require participation in the Arts Census for those groups, which, as you can imagine, took a lot of hand-holding. These are very much the mom and pop folks that I talked about before, who some of them only ever captured email information. So by taking these Dance Advance participants through the program, we sort of, quite frankly, blew their mind with what was available to them, what kind of tools were available. But what we're hoping to do is leverage that and look at maybe a national footprint. If these are companies that were on that threshold of touring nationally, might we empower them with information about who it is they're reaching locally that they can then share with presenters in any other market they're planning on going to. With a program like this, we're now able to include this national research, or this local research project that's impacting the entire arts sector in all of our core operating grants. Right? It's a much different case where we're saying we're serving the entire field through this program. You don't need to be a member of LA Stage and Live to participate in the program, so it's really impacted our ability to say that we're serving the entire region, regardless of an organization's ability to pay membership dues. So it's really fundamentally changed who we are, who our core constituents are, and how we're serving both those constituencies and how we're perceived within the funding community. I think it's really, it's helped us on a lot of our grant applications, because we had received in the past panel feedback of, oh, well, you're only serving a small sliver that can afford to pay membership dues. And so I think that having this census be, I would say even to some degree, the spine of who our organization is as an entity, has changed our ability to raise money. That said, one of our most recent hires, we had some staff transition. We shifted the title of that position from a sort of director of communications to a technology programs manager. We see that one of the core needs in the community is that infrastructure, right? The ability to do research, the ability to provide customer relationship management, that aggregating data, that really kind of the software suites that are available out there are crucial in terms of the sustainability of the field. And so we've sort of put much of our efforts and focus into that. And so by finding someone who had that tech experience, who had experience with training and sort of walking people through new technologies, that was a key hire for us. And so we kind of shifted our staffing to accommodate this program and how we serve the field. The previous model had been pay to play and pay to extract. The current model is it's free to participate. So with our foundation dollars and there have been some government funding as well, our local Department of Cultural Affairs and our County Arts Commission, we include this program as part of our application. So we felt it was crucial for it to be free. We know that we can't tell a story unless we've got a really comprehensive data set. So we completely lowered the barriers for anyone to participate, and that was certainly required of us for the County Arts Commission to come on board of requiring it of grantees. So we include it as part of all of our grant applications as one of our key programs because we remain committed to the idea that it needs to be free. But what we found in a market as big as this is staff transition is a high barrier. So if you're training an organization on not only how to think about this idea, think about this way of thinking about audience participation and engagement and audience development, if that person leaves, you kind of got to start from ground zero, from that baseline. And so trying to figure out a way to have multiple points of contact within an organization and get them all trained that if you lose one, you don't lose that organization maybe for a year. Getting those small nonprofits up to speed with data aggregation, normalizing data, has taken some heavy lifting. It's taken a lot of training and technical assistance and hand-holding through the process to really even wrap their heads around what it takes to upload your information. And then, perhaps more importantly, to empower them with the knowledge and the resource of how to use this tool. Right? It's accessible online. You can pull down reports at any time you choose. The previous model, when it was a big list, it was all a phone call away to a vendor across the country. So we've now kind of put the tools in the hands of the local administrators, most of whom we found are accidental administrators, right? It's that person, it's the actor or the dancer or the designer who put up a show, put up another show, and 3 years later they found they were running the place. that serves the major institutions, right? Those that have a robust marketing staff, for example, Center Theater Group or the Getman Playhouse, they live in this system. This is a really valuable tool for them. So for LA Stage Alliance, it was a big win because we saw this as a way to address the needs of a really broad constituent base. We could kind of bring up the small mom and pop shops and also serve our kind of major landmark institutions in the region. But most importantly for us, what we've been able to do is change the frame on how we talk about arts and culture participation. We're now up to 200 organizations participating in the Arts Census. We have just shy of 4 million households in the data set. We know that we've got patrons coming from the 50 states to LA, so there's a cultural tourism angle that we can really drill down into. Perhaps a key turning point in this is when we reported out that 41% of LA County households, the head of our County Arts Commission came to me and said, "Really? 41%? And I said, yeah, it's absolutely true. We actually had a strong partner in Orange County as well, and we had 50% of the households in Orange County. And she realized the power of this data and being able to tell the story to her commissioners and her supervisors, and now as a funding agency, they're requiring participation in the census of their grantees. So we're expecting through that to jump to probably 400 organizations within the next 18 months. And as you can imagine, there's going to be a vast amount of data there, and I think perhaps a front page story in the LA Times. I can dream. To be able to really to change the narrative, who it is that attends arts and culture. We found really broad income diversity. It kind of dispelled the rumors of only the elite are attending. We kind of had a 30-30-30 division. In changing that frame, it's really becoming a valuable advocacy tool for us as an organization and for the funders. We've been reporting out on this idea to lots of different funders, and they're seeing it as a natural kind of extension or supplement to what the California Community Data Project, or not Community, Cultural Data Project provides. And I know there are lots of regions around the country who are using the CDP. In the CDP, this information is usually just kind of one field, but we're able to really drill down into specifics. Just to jump back to what's available within the census. The entire data set, once it's normalized and clean, it gets appended with about 200 different categories of demographics and psychographics provided by Axiom, which is like a credit bureau. It's Big Brother. Our vendor gets a hard drive delivered every month of the most up-to-date consumer data they can. And so we're finally using what the commercial sector has done all along, right? They know every time you make a purchase, every time you fill out a warranty card, any of those things, they're able to leverage that so they can reach you more appropriately in the places where you're going to be. So now, arts and culture, and specifically a nonprofit organization, is taking advantage of that information that's purchasable, right? It's out on the common market. Data is bought and sold every day. But we're really clear with our participating organizations that we will only use their information in aggregate, right? We're not selling individual households. That's what's enabled us to get the sign-off of the legal team of some of the major institutions. They realize that there's a lot of benefit to the community, and specifically to them, in their participation, for them to be able to grow their audience, to expand their reach, to broaden and diversify their current patrons and perhaps their partners out in the field. Data aggregation is not sexy. The data geek in me was like, oh my god, everyone's gonna love this. This is the coolest idea ever. That was a sad surprise, that not everyone thought this was the sexiest idea ever. So the biggest sort of takeaway for us is meeting organizations where they are and figuring out when it's appropriate to have this conversation with them. So what we've tried to do is have rolling uploads, rolling trainings, this is now a year-long engagement. that we meet the organizations when they're ready to have the conversation, and we're ready to hold their hand as best we can when they're ready to upload the information. These are tools that not everyone knows how to use or even really think about. We know our big institutions live in this data. It's how they deal with 75 to 80% churn. How can we take that thinking, those ideas, those best practices, and boil them down to something that an entirely volunteer arts organization might leverage? I would love for there to be a national database of arts and culture participation, right? That if we could link up certainly the 20 regions that are currently engaged in this, there are probably more than that, but if there were a way for us to do kind of an annual report with a national footprint, but then be able to drill down locally with comprehensive participation. Might we then begin to partner with folks who also have huge footprints? Could we partner with sports teams, right? The Staples Center, Dodger Stadium. Wouldn't it begin to be really interesting to understand are you someone who likes to do things, right? Are there those kinds of patrons? Might we find out, or what might we find out in looking at for-profit music concert venues? There's a fantastic indie music scene in Los Angeles. Could we partner with them and understand, are there differences in sort of generational shifts in how people participate? Certainly we could probably, make some best guesses around that, but to have the specific data to determine if it's true or not. And then just understanding, are there clusters of patrons given certain sort of thematic or subject areas? Is there a classics audience that goes to see classical Shakespeare and maybe goes to a garden, sort of botanical or arboretum space? What might we be able to discern for families with presence of children? Certainly zoo or children's theater might make sense, but are there other pieces in that mix that we could follow a patron from their first engagement in the arts throughout their lifetime, and empower those arts organizations to best use their resources to reach the appropriate patron at the appropriate time? Certainly if we could do that locally, it would be fantastic. If we could do it nationally, it would be beyond.